Hello, my name is Anton, and today we are on our another lecture of the program Audit at Fingertips. And today I'm glad to speak about the topic of issue validation, which is very interesting because this is something that goes beyond the normal risk-based audit cycle and very important from the point of view of risk remediation. You may see that this activity could be called progress monitoring, like in international internal audit standards, or issue follow-up, issue remediation follow-up, or maybe some other terms. However, whatever term is, the main idea of this activity is to still bring assurance. It's the same objective as for the audit itself. Okay, so a few definitions from international audit standards as always. So remember, the audit mission is to enhance and protect organizational value via publishing assurance, issuing the audit assurance on effectiveness of internal controls. And the assurance itself, it's a statement, and the statement is to be backed up by the evidence. And in addition to that, you see another quote from the standards which says that the audit function must establish the follow-up process, or in our case issue validation process, to ensure what? That management took actions to remediate the risk or accepted the risk and didn't take action. However, in our today's lecture we will be speaking about the cases when we are mitigating the risk, because the acceptance of the risk itself, it's a complex topic which requires a separate lesson. Okay, now why do we need the validation? First of all, the purpose is the same as we mentioned, the same as for the audit. So the problem is when we finish an audit and we find some issues, it drives the assurance which is not sufficient. It might be partial, it might be room for improvement. It doesn't necessarily mean that everything is bad, because the overall scope might be okay, and most of the controls, 90-95% of the controls may be acting well. However, some minor issues might be found. It's not something that could be excluded from the report because it's important from the point of view of the driving the rating. At the same time, it's not something like not the end of the world, and management is expected to remediate the issues via the action plans, which we discussed in our last lecture. For every issue, an action plan is created, and the action plan should be performed and delivered to some particular date in future. It should be time bound. Absolutely, it's required time bound, and this should be assigned the accountable person for the plan completion. And when it happens, when the plan is completed and remediation actions are taken, this is where internal audit returns to this part of the scope which you covered in the risk-based audit and start kind of a small audit, and start working on the same way on the controls, reviewing the design, reviewing the testing, their execution, to achieve the assurance, to give the final piece of the puzzle into the audit opinion for the scope which we covered, risk-based audit, where we actually unearthed this issue. So as you may see here, the logic is very similar behind the issue, similar to internal audit. So when we identify control, here you see that's control in the audit, and we didn't have, internal audit, we didn't have enough evidence to back up the sufficient assurance, whereas an exception, whereas an issue, we issue a report with the partial or insufficient assurance rating, and then we get back, we review the evidence that was produced during the action plan implementation, we see that sufficient assurance could be placed on the controls, and we issue the final, our final assurance statement, our opinion regarding the remediated controls. And here you may see those two pie diagrams. The first shows the large blue scope of the audit, which everything which covered. And the blue part is where controls are fine. However, there is a small portion of it where we find the issue. And you see it's small, right? And in the same time, we still need to do the validation work. And however, when we move to the validation, we don't cover anything which is blue on the left diagram. We cover only the issue part. So we focus only on the issues. We limit our scope with the extent of the issue and its impact. Okay, now when we start working on the validation, the question is, what are we expected to do? What should we do? What kind of user procedures and approaches should we use to validate whether the issue was remediated and the risks are properly mitigated? Remember, it's all about risks. Again, everything in the audit, it's not about the procedures, it's not about the doing ABC, it's all about the risk. Your opinion is about whether risk is mitigated sufficiently or not. Similar to the audit procedures, we use here design assessment. But only in those cases where issue relates to the design. It means that during the audit we have found that the design of a control is not good. It means that some questions, who, what, when, where, why, how, so some of those questions the answer was not good. So not the right person executing the control, or the right person, but the actions are not sufficient, frequency is not sufficient, or evidence is missed, etc. However, if our issue related only to the control execution, meaning design is fine, but the execution for some reason didn't meet the standards didn't meet the expectations, in that case we do only operating effectiveness testing. We don't do design assessment. Doesn't make any sense to assess the design which was considered as a good design, as a good example of a control, without any flaws, without any deficiencies. In that case, we need just only to perform operative effectiveness testing to verify that the actions taken ensure that the people who are responsible for the controls, they follow the design logic, they follow the design procedure. However, if you have design issues and you perform design assessment during the validation, you still need to perform operative effectiveness testing, because the design was changed. It means a new control was implemented, or maybe the existing control has been changed. In that case, we need to see if it's being executed well, or probably not. And there is another animal which we haven't seen before, and the animal which relates to the validations, and this is not something we may expect to see on the risk-based audits, is one-time remediation action. What does it mean exactly? It's not OET, it's not design, it's not a control even, it's something business do just once to fix particular issues related to the existing assets. Would it be physical assets or data? It doesn't matter. It means that over the time when the ineffective control was in place, some assets were impacted. For instance, data created by the control or the area of the control was incorrect, or maybe the production didn't meet the standards, anything. And although the control design will be fixed, the assets which are not in good condition, they still exist and they need to be fixed. And in that case, we look for one-time remediation action. You can call it OTA. Sometimes it's called OTR, one-time remediation. It depends again on your methodology. However, you should remember that there is one thing which is very specific for one-time action. So it's done only once. So it's called one time for a reason. It's never repeated in future, unlike controls. That's the difference between controls and OTAs. OTAs is done once. We will not repeat it. Controls are implemented once and they repeat depending on the conditions. Would they be executed with the established frequency, or they are event driven, but they will repeat under certain conditions, unlike one-time remediation action. So you see examples. For instance, identify and revoke excessive access. This is an example of OTA. So in that case, we need to, business have to go to the list of the entitlements, user entitlements, identify excessive access and fix it. Or another example, correct transaction allocation. We assume in this theoretic example, all the examples, again, I keep repeating that they are absolutely fictional. If we have a set of transactions which were incorrectly allocated to some product, for instance, the transactions might be correct, allocation is not correct for the purpose of internal reporting. In that case, the business is expected to do the same. They need to identify incorrect transactions and fix them. Or maybe some customer files were duplicated, and in that case we need to merge them to make sure we have only one file per customer. And here's the thing, so what do we do to test whether one-time actions were performed as expected? And audit focuses on two things. First, the completeness. We'd like to verify that nothing was overlooked, and we're trying to find the cases where an asset had to be selected and fixed, however it wasn't. And the second thing we're looking at is assuming that the population of the items to fix is complete, and business identified and selected everything as expected. However, the action might be not sufficient. So, for instance, not all the entitlements are revoked, or transactions allocation is changed, but to a wrong product. And here are other examples related to those three. So, for instance, like how can we test it for the population of user entitlements? We can just check. Because nowadays with all computer-assisted tools and techniques, we can sample from the database 100% of the population. Well, technically we don't need to make a sample, we just cover the whole population. We can verify that no maker privilege is granted to the people from a specific team, from the payments preparation. So checker privilege is not granted to the payments preparation team. And when we're dealing with transactions allocations to certain products, we can check all the transactions for the specific period with specific conditions, whether they are allocated to the right product. Like here, for instance, all German records were allocated to the product FX Spot GE, well, assuming we have different FX Spot products. Or the last example here, we may take a sample of customers and verify that their files were properly merged, and every customer has only one file. Getting back to the what differs OTA and the controls, meaning DEA design, the control design effectiveness assessment. Sometimes, well, I would say even often, DEA is being confused with OTAs. And the basis for that is that when we need to deploy control, people are focusing on the fact of the deployment rather than the fact of that control was implemented and started to work. In that case, the expectations of the control owners did not meet expectations of internal audit, of the audit, and sometimes it may create misunderstanding. And if you're auditing, if you are validating the issues, that you should keep it in mind that sometimes the stakeholders need to be educated in terms of what needs to be covered and what is expected in terms of the evidence. Because assurance is provided for control design and execution, not for control deployment. Because control is being that's very true. Control is being deployed once. However, if the control is deployed and you need to do the design effectiveness assessment, in that case, the deployment doesn't need to be tested just for a simple reason. If control operates effectively, doesn't matter how it was deployed. If control operates ineffectively, again, the fact that it was properly deployed won't change the fact that the control is ineffective. Thus, you see on this screen, it's very simple. So we have an action plan which leads to non-repeat and remediation, fixing the past data. In that case, we cover it as an OTA. Or the second example, we have an audit issue which is resolved via implementation of a control. So you see, control implementation, which was done just once, will next result in the implemented controls, which will be a repeating activity. In that case, we cover control via IDA, but we don't cover control implementation. There is no need in it. Validation lifecycle. From the administrative point of view, how should we manage the validations? Of course, the specific lifecycle, you may find it in your audit methodology. However, there are some steps, reasonable steps, that we may expect to see in any methodology because they help to keep the process controlled and do not accept the issues, do not accept the issues into the validation where the remediation is not properly done, is not ready. So in the beginning, you see we have an audit issue. Next step, we see issue remediation. It means that the stakeholders are working on it. That step, that block, they perform the control, maybe development, the control deployment. They allow for some sustainability period, which is, by the way, very, very important. Remember, every time you deal with controls, whether it's a design issue or this is execution, meaning OET issue, you always have to do operating effectiveness testing. And for operating effectiveness testing, you should make a sample. And to make a sample, you need a population. Because if you don't have a population, you cannot make a sample. If you can't make a sample, you don't have enough evidence to confirm control is effective. Therefore, what normally happens when we deal with action plans, the action plan consists not only from the particular steps to be done to implement or fix the controls, it also allows for a specific period of sustainability. We allow time to pass to accumulate enough evidence of control execution. Let's say you have a quarterly control, newly implemented quarterly control to address the audit issue. In that case, you need to allow 6 months to pass because you need at least 2 cases of control execution. 1 quarter is not sufficient. Or if you have an automated control that happens probably once a week, you may want to see 3-4 months of sustainability. Again, this period is driven by your methodology sampling guidance. You just need to ensure that when you come to validate it, you will have enough evidence. Because if you don't have enough evidence, you will not be able to issue the assurance statement, just because there is nothing to talk about. Okay, so once the sustainability period is over and everything is done, stakeholders send a notification to the audit saying everything is done, we are ready for the issue to be validated. And what does audit do? The audit performs a high-level initial review of the evidence provided by stakeholders. What's the purpose of it? The purpose is because the validation itself, as you remember, it's a small audit with its own documentation, with own procedures, with own terms, and this is an activity for which you need to secure the working hours in the plan. But before starting spending your budget on that, you need to verify that this is something that's worth to spend the budget for, because sometimes it's obvious that the issue is not remediated. In that case, you can, or probably evidence is not in good shape. In that case, you may give initial feedback to stakeholders saying that we don't see enough evidence so that the work was properly done. And in that case, the stakeholders are expected to either to prepare a better notification with better evidence, or maybe, depending on the methodology, issue management methodology, to extend the deadlines and do more work to ensure that risks are mitigated, or probably this issue will be reset and they need to issue a new action plan. Depends. So as you see, if the evidence is sufficient, we confirm, as audit, we confirm that the issue is accepted into the validation. It's nice to send it via email, so stakeholders would understand that we are ready to proceed to the validation, and we may share this validation start date. And we proceed to the work, and we perform DEA, we perform OET, we perform OTA testing. And if we get enough evidence that the controls work well, in that case we issue sufficient assurance, do proper documentation, and close the audit issue. Happy end. So what we've discussed today, it was a quick lecture. Remember, a few points, 5 bullets on the screen. So first, issue is a small audit. Just treat it like that and you will always be safe. Validation scope is limited only with the issue scope. Of course, it doesn't mean you must not go beyond that scope. If you see that you need additional evidence, probably beyond the issue scope, if you need to review some process end to end, in that case, of course, you should use your right to audit, because this is your opinion. You put your signature under the assurance statement. Therefore, you may request any evidence which is relevant to your review. Doesn't mean you should request everything, only the relevant things. We deal with 3 types of review. Well, unlike in the audit, where we have only DA and OET reviewed in the previous lectures, here we deal with one-time remediation action testing as well. Important point that OTA is not a control, and when we deploy controls, the OTA for deployment, we don't need to test it. Example from the technology world: if we deploy a technology control, we don't need to change SDLC if we see that the real evidence that control works well and it's sustainable, it's stable, there are no deficiencies, there are no problems with the control. It doesn't matter what was done in terms of the management of business requirements or testing, because the control proved its effectiveness in the production environment, and of course we will run the tests in lower environments. And the last one is that the remediation work should be accepted into validation if only we have enough evidence that it's worth the issue is worth it to proceed with the validation. Next time we will review the risk control matrix and how to create test programs. We will touch the heart of every audit and see how it beats. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this lecture useful, and the information I've shared with you, you can use it, you can integrate it into your routine. See you next time. Bye bye.